Hey YouTube, this is Gross Messer bringing you a short little video on my Hail Caesar army. This is my tactical use of my cohorts, why I decided to put them in small units and try to make a complete legion out of them this way. Um, I just like the way it looks on the table. I really do. This is when I think about Roman legionaries and the triplex aces or duplex aces. This is kind of what I envision when I play the game. But like with anything, when you make a choice like this, you come up with some tactical situations and problems that are inherent in your deployment of your forces and the way you make up your armies. And I don't care what gaming system you play, that's always going to be there. And well, it should, because you don't want to have the greatest thing in the world where it never gets beaten. And I mean, why bother to play? And this is one of the reasons why I chose to make my legionnaires in small units. I played a few games in standard size units, and I even tried out a large unit once, and they seemed a little static. It seemed too much like just a straight up battle line and very little movement, just a bunch of rolling of the dice. And I've those kind of games don't really appeal to me, where you just line up battle lines and just throw dice down on the table and hope for somebody to break somewhere. I like to be able to move my troops and make them seem like they're doing something on the table. And with this Triplex Aces formation here, that it seems to work that way for me. Of course, and again, depending on what gaming system you use. Now, I haven't used it in anything else other than Hail Caesar, so that my opinion of it may change if I do it in something else. But I'm sure that whoever writes rule books for for Romans of this period, they put that into their thoughts. And so let's get on with this. Um, Another thing, it seems it's historically validated or corroborated that this was. There's a lot of things that we don't know about it. I don't understand. I don't know personally how far back the second and third lines were from the first line. And when you're dealing with human beings, they can only be so far back from the front line or their support's no good. But if they're too close, then they're going to be drawn into the battle prematurely. So it'd be very interesting to know something about how far back they actually were in reality. Now on the gaming table, when you're putting your divisions down in Hail Caesar, it's you got to take into consideration that where are you going to put them. Historically they were in the middle with their allies on either flank. I try to follow that as much as I can, because regardless of the game that we're playing, I really want to try to that. Even if it gives me a bunch of problems later on in the game, I would rather deal with that than try to deal with things that are, you know, something that's not historically corroborated. Now, like with Caesar when he fought at Pharsalus against Pompey, he took cohorts out from his third rank and put them behind his cavalry to help support and to stop the large cavalry attack that Pompey was using to try to win the battle. Um, that sort of thing, yes, but to flip flop and say I put all my my allies on one flank and my cohorts on the other, and try. They kind of tended to, from what I've read, tend to have a certain pattern for when they deployed, and I think I like to try to stick to that as much as possible. So we take this first look here. It's your standard sort of stuff, four in the front, three in the second, and three in the third. Uh, that's how I try to tend to deploy my center division. Now I have a video up of me playing against the Carthaginians, and I kind of broke this down a little bit because I didn't have enough um, units to make a full division on my right or my left. I had to break it up and move some cohorts somewhere to make sure I had enough units in the division. But as this thing grows, I'm going to try to keep my cohorts all together in a central division, and then move them that way, and then try to build up my allied troops on either flank along with my cavalry. And possibly I may do another video on how I'm using the cavalry, how I'm doing them, trying to garner that historical feel from them. But this one's just about the legionary cohorts. In this first one, I'm showing you that the front rank moves out to engage the enemy. Um, Again, far back was the second rank? How far back was the third rank? Uh, they show these gaps, and I like the fact that there's a lot of question on how they actually used these gaps. Some people say they were gaps so the first rank, the first units could fall back between between the gaps of the second line, or for the second line to move up and fill in the gaps of the first line. Well, again, it comes back to distance. If you're too far back and your cohorts of the first rank ends are overlapped by the enemy troops, you leave yourself to, at least one cohort, especially on either end, could be enveloped fairly quickly. So there had to have been a threat somewhere along the line to keep the units kind of pinned down in place. They could see running in between the two cohorts, that would be suicide. Well, or if the first four cohorts, when they made contact with the enemy, did they fan out, create one large battle line, and then fell back through the second line cohorts, or were relieved by them as they moved forward, they moved back? That seems awfully complicated for hand-to-hand combat. When you're fighting at distance, I can see that, but up close and personal, I would find that hard to, we're just going to back up, you know. Now I know that there was ebbs and flows in any sort of those, like even through Renaissance times when there's hand-to-hand combat, there's this ebb and flow. You fight, you break off, you fight, you fight, you break off. Perhaps they utilize those breaks in the hand-to-hand combat. I tend to like to think that when I look at this, it looks like it's set up not just so units can move forward and relieve, but I look at it as like those gaps are there to allow like a series of rolling punches where the first four cohorts move forward, attack your enemy, throw their pylons, pin them in place, and then here comes that second line right on their heels, and bam, hits them again, and possibly breaks them or pushes them. And then maybe as they are pushing them back, here comes that first four cohorts again, and they charge back in, and it's just these ongoing series of punches. And then maybe the third line moves up and is able to relieve the first line, and then they charge in, and then there's another series of punches from the Roman army that eventually would break the center. I have a hard time feeling that the moving back was done very often. I mean, during the combat sequence, I don't know. It just seems very awkward. But what I can't envision that happening where people back up and then these guys move forward so cleanly in that. So that is why with mine, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever employ that where I'm trying to back up or disengage from a unit and that sort of thing. I don't know. But let's talk. Not get off topic here. Let's so, well, and stay on the tactics that I want to talk about right now, and that is the idea of supporting that front rank. And with your second rank, as you look at the diagram, there's three different options for each one of those second rank uh, cohorts. One, you move to the left, or the right or the center. That gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility depending upon that first combat phase, whether you're charged or you charge them. And obviously, within all games, there's some sort of mathematical advantage, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the options available, this is what I like about this. If I take the same number of troops and I break them down into just 5 standard size units, um, with just the same number of models, but I break them down and make standard size units out of them. Now I've only got 5 units available to me, 3 in the front, 2 in the back. Basically a duplex aces, but with standard size units. That to me doesn't lend it on a smaller scale the flexibility that I like, but the units tend to be a little too big and unwieldy for that, for my particular taste. Now, other people may love that. I don't. I like this triplex aces in the cohort formation and try to push myself tactically to figure out a way to make this work. Okay, we'll get to the third rank here in a moment. And again, like with all gaming systems, there's some sort of mathematical advantage or disadvantage to certain units. And in our examples, I just use Gaelic war bands. And you can see, like in the small chord, the clash is 5, sustain is 5, support is 2, long range 0, and your morale save is 4, and your stamina is 4. And the stamina 4 is a big deal. That's where you're really hamstringing yourself a little bit by doing this. But I don't mind. I really want to force myself to play to the strengths of this army, and the strength of this army is in its mobility and its pylum and its ability to support each other, the drilled factor. Now, if you're charged by a Gaelic warband and they've got the 9 attacks and they're unsupported, I mean, they do start off with a little bit of an advantage, but the pylum I've noticed tends to have such a equalizing effect on that in the games, and especially when I use it in standard size units, they because everything's like a 7 clash and a 7 sustain and a support of 3, so you can turn the tail on the turn it around really quickly on these Gaelic war bands and stuff, um, to the point where it's kind of unfun to play that way because you go in with so many advantages to start with that with any game based upon math, it's going to come out to your advantage so many times. I don't know, the fun went out of it really quickly for me with Romans and standard size units or large units. Now, if you're playing a super large game and each one of your units, you clump all this stuff together, like you're playing legion size units. Well, that's different. But then again, their war bands are going to be bigger. Everything's going to be larger, and there's going to be more stuff on the table, and you're going to have a much more static looking game, I would believe. But this is what I like. I like the challenge. I like the way it forces me to make choices, especially when it comes to support the infantry or even moving out to the edge to support my allied infantry or allied cavalry. Okay, here we go. In this example, uh, what in the world happened here? For a second. Okay, here we have where the third rank, not only has the second rank has moved up to. Hold on, let's see. Okay, yeah, I think I missed a slide here. But on this one, that you see where the third rank has moved up. Now again, like it says at the bottom, that it all depends upon how the combat phases work out. If the combat phases work out where your front rank uh, cohorts are doing very well, you pick and choose where you want to try to add that extra power, that extra punch, or where you want to save the situation. It could be that maybe that Gaelic warband just put a whooping on one of your cohorts, and you got to move in to support not with just one, but maybe two. And what you can wind up with, like in this situation, is what's referred to as that pig's head formation. Um, yeah, it's this one in the this is at that point where the game begins to mathematically turn against a lot of enemies of Rome in the game. Is that in the first one they tend to have a little bit of an advantage over me in my cohorts because my clash and my sustain is so low. But once I begin adding the support of the second, third ranks into the combat, I can with the number of dice you're beginning to get an advantage. They drop like I believe the Gaelic warband drops from a clash of 9 to a sustain of 6. Well, that's a big difference when your morale when the Roman morale is 4, is 5, and I can bring in like a support of maybe 1 or 2 units. Then all of a sudden things begin to change very, very rapidly for a warband based army against the Romans. Uh, this is the challenge. I mean, where do you support? When do you support? What's happening on your flanks? I mean, that can change. I mean, sometimes you've got to begin to try to expand your frontage or move over to help. Then you get into that individual orders and in Hail Caesar. For those of you that don't know or just watching this, yeah, it's all based on leadership, and you either give division orders or individual orders, and then some units like the Romans, they can make an initiative move. But still, you're asking to try to get that maneuverability, maybe on a leadership of 8 instead of 9 or something, and that's hard to do sometimes, especially more than 2 or 3 times, unless you get really lucky. And I haven't been able to get past 2 or 3 on individual orders, and it can leave you in a very vulnerable situation. But again, that's why I play them this way. I like them this way. Um, Here we go. A different example of going into support, and my second rank and one cohort of the third rank moved to support the front, where the 2 remaining cohorts moved to the flanks. Now, obviously, that would have to be done on individual orders, and be that as may, but tactically, that's what you're going to try to do, because if you can break that center or hold that center, try to find that place where you've got that advantage, and then that's where you place your support. If you're just all in on the single battle line, you know, the dice can be fickle. Once you lose that one move, one standard size unit of legionnaires, and you don't have anything left in the back to respond because you're either supporting or you're doing something else. That makes a big difference, a big difference in the way that the game can proceed. I really enjoy this, having that tactical flexibility. And there's a lot of different armies I'm looking forward to playing too. I mean, I'm not just strictly going to play the Romans. I've got a Persian army I'm putting together with a lot of Sparabara. I can't wait to get them on the table. That'll be fun. Uh, a Successor Kingdoms army I'm working on as well. It's an addiction, I know. But uh, but this is what I wanted to talk about: how I put it together, why I put it together the way I did. I've got one video up of a game. I'm hoping to get in a few more games here fairly soon and try out this Legion as it is, with my general in the middle, and then I kind of expand my support units, my allied infantry and cavalry, and see how that works out. In summary, break this thing down. The Triplex Aces is historically used by the Romans. There are some questions about how it was actually applied on the battlefield, but the setup is known. There's a lot of different sources you can go to verify that. I don't need to do it here. Um, it allows for flexible movement of units. Um, it's difficult in Hell Caesar, but it can be done. Uh, I tend to use my general as pay those extra points to get him up to a 9, so I can try to move some troops individually. Uh, and you have to be aware of the proximity rule. Like if somebody's getting around your flanks and they're getting within that 12-inch range, you're going to have to turn to face them anyway. So that may keep you from doing some things uh, tactically with your second or third line that you would like to do. It happened to me in one of my games that I didn't do a battle report on it, but yeah, I've been pinned in places just by that rule by some cavalry, and uh, so it was kind of a pain. But I do have a tactical advantage in the infantry when I use my cohorts. I really like that. Um, and it creates that tactical challenge, which is basically the movement of units around the table. Uh, when to support, where to support. Do you support with one or two cohorts over here as opposed to over there? Or do you, and when you go with that 4-3-3, not everybody in that front rank is going to have uh, an easily supported position from the second rank. So you've got a 4-3-3. Well, you've got three cohorts that are there to support. Somebody's going to be left hanging. So which one? You know, do you wait? Do you try to bring up the third uh, rank? Along with the second. Um, a lot of decisions to be made. It's a lot of fun. I'm just a real fan of that style of play, and I really would like to see more of it. I looked like when Hail Caesar, a lot of battle reports that came out fairly quickly, and when I saw a long line static battle reports, uh, it just didn't look very much. Didn't look fun to me. Didn't look. I mean, I'm using my power against your power, and whichever power won at that moment, it was over. I don't know, just I like the movement. I like the challenge of trying to get things into a place to where they can do what I need them to do, as opposed to just being the in object or the irresistible force. I like to take the lesser of both and try to achieve more. Um, and again, for me, it just looks better. It feels better when I play in Triplex Aces with my Romans. It feels like I'm I'm trying that tactic. I'm really pushing it, pushing the envelope with it. It's a lot of fun. Um, you got to think. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. That proximity rule can really take advantage of you as a Roman player, especially against heavy cavalry armies, because they can get to your second rank, especially if your allies have, because you got to remember they're not going to be as good as your Romans. Uh, every army had weaknesses, and that would be a lot of times theirs, especially the time period I like to play. I like to play Marian Romans just before that uh, Marius and oh gosh, I'm having it's the Roman Civil War. I am oh man, am I drawing a blank here? It's not Pompey. Oh, what was it? Marius and oh gosh, somebody can throw me a bone here and tell me who I'm forgetting. Uh, but it seems, I mean, Pompey was in it, but I don't think he was one of the leading characters. He came out of it smelling like a rose, but gosh, who? Oh man, somebody let me know. and it just feels better when I have built-in weaknesses. When you go with like a true Caesarian army, a Caesar time period army, when you have all those elite legionnaires, the 10th Legion, and then you're using German cavalry because you no longer trust, the Gauls or the home the equestrian order from Rome to be your cavalry because the Germans were just so much better. It just becomes a real big hammer, and it's tough to deal with. And that's why I chose not to play one of those. I do like the challenges. I hope you enjoyed the video. Actually, more of of me just rambling on about how I love my Romans and the Triplex Aces. Hopefully, I'll have some more battle reports from Hail Caesar up fairly soon. Try to get these guys in a big legion like that and see how it works out instead of, because I had to kind of penny packet them out a little bit to help fill out my other two divisions. So hopefully I'll have enough more allied troops painted up and ready to go, and we'll see how this works out against a different opponent. Hopefully I'll be able to get some revenge against those Carthaginians. If anybody's seen my other video, uh, they hammered me pretty good with that big cavalry division he had, and I need to come up with an answer for that. So everybody, I hope you enjoy. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I hope you got something out of this. Try it out. Make your own cohorts, make your own small units, and see how you like to play. Um, I hope you enjoy. Subscribe if you want to. Hopefully each one of these will get better over time. I'll get a little smoother at this, but hopefully I get some feedback and hear from some other Hail Caesar players and see what they're doing and how they like to do it. And game on, people. Game on.